everyone, Emily here for my regular Facebook Live. In case you haven't noticed, I've been doing these every Monday, Wednesday, Friday around 2 or 3 in the afternoon, and I think that's going to become a regular thing actually. Probably Monday, Wednesday, Friday around 3 o'clock. I may change that, but that seems to be what's happening right now. I'm looking a bit tousled right now because I've been doing yard work, which I never knew I would enjoy so much. It has been a complete revelation to me. I enjoy yard work. I enjoy gardening. Very weird. But it's been really good. And it's been really good to have a project, something to focus on, and to see results in throughout this crazy period that we're in right now. And I'll probably be doing a Facebook Live about that too, and what I've learned and how I've grown just from doing yard work. Anyway, somebody asked me recently a really good question about boundaries. Actually, wait, before I do that, I just want to say I'm wearing this Arizona t-shirt, Wheelchair Rugby, in case you can't see it, because unfortunately, sadly, my husband's on the U of A Wheelchair Rugby team, and we just lost the former coach. He died yesterday or the day before. We just heard about it yesterday. That's why I say I'm not sure if it's yesterday or the day before. So Brad McFadden, love you. And we miss you, and thank you for being such a bright light in our lives. So that said, I want to go into the topic of today, and it has to do with boundaries. Boundaries are a huge topic. I keep covering these big topics because people keep asking me these amazing questions. But boundaries are extremely important. It's taken me a lot of years to figure that out. And anyway, the question that someone asked, that Roman asked me was, oh, I didn't write it down here, but it's in the post. During this pandemic, when so many people need help, it can be hard to set our boundaries, especially for those of us who are givers. I'm definitely a giver. I like to give, I like to serve, I like to help, I like to take care of people, I like for people to feel good. It can be really hard to do that without feeling taken for granted or taken advantage of. So his question was really about how do we set our boundaries? When do we set our boundaries? And I think this even really goes to the question of how do we even know what our boundaries are? Because I know that for myself, especially as a woman, you know, and it's nothing against my own family or, you know, my sort of origin, but, you know, the environment in which I grew up, there was kind of in some ways, kind of a wishy-washy idea of boundaries. And boundaries are an extremely important thing when they're set in a healthy way, okay? There are a lot of ways that we tend to sort of establish our boundaries or set our boundaries. Not all of them are healthy, and I'm gonna explain what that's all about. But anyway, as you know, many of you have seen some of my other videos, and so what I'm gonna talk about here is boundaries as they relate to the M-Powers. I'm not going to go over the M-Powers again. You can see my website, the link is there, but basically that we have these 3 types of powers. There's one particular M-Power inside of us. We all have all 3 of these, okay? There's one particular one whose job it is, whose boundaries are all about boundaries, or not all about boundaries, but that's one of their primary functions. Anybody want to guess which one is about boundaries? Just curious. I don't know if anybody knows these well enough who's watching. The main M-Power that has to do with boundaries is the sovereign, okay? So the sovereign is that part of us that's very wise, very intuitive, that knows. It knows our truth, which is who we are and who we're here to be. So it has that sense of direction. It knows that sense of direction and purpose that we were born with. It also knows what is right and wrong for us as individuals, independently of anyone or anything else. And this is what's really important, because sometimes, as I kind of referenced in my own background and everybody's background, is that we all sometimes can get some mixed messages about where our boundaries are, when we can set them, what is appropriate for us, what isn't. And sometimes we're taught that, you know, for example, you know, we're not allowed to think or feel a certain way, or that, you know, sometimes when we do try to set our boundaries as children, we're taught that it's not okay to act that way, for example. So anyway, the sovereign though, the word sovereign itself actually means 2 main things. Is the sovereign can mean a monarch, as you see, it's kind of like a king or a queen. So I see it like my inner sovereign is like an inner king or queen inside of you, that very wise, knowing part of you. But it also means independent, free-willed. So when they talk about like a sovereign nation, that means it's an independent nation, it's free-willed. So your sovereign is the part of you that knows what is right or wrong for you, independently of anyone or anything else. okay? So when it comes to setting our boundaries or knowing our boundaries, that is the one that knows. That is the one that we can trust and turn to. Now, these other two are fantastic. The free spirit is wonderful. The free spirit, of course, is the part of us that just is loving and joyful and creative and wants to have fun. It's really the very heart. It's our heart. And it just loves to love and be free. But part of its whole thing about being free is very expansive. It doesn't really know much about boundaries or how to set boundaries, okay? So that's why it's not so great at that, generally. And then the impresario is more of our left brain thinking part of us, that likes to fix things and figure things out. It has some sense of boundaries, but the reason why why the sovereign is in such a great position more than all of our other empowers to know a sense of boundaries is because it's almost like if your impresario is your left brain and your free spirit is your right brain. I think of your sovereign as like your higher mind, your wisdom, your intuition. So when you're dealing with a situation that has to do with how do I set my boundaries, how do I know when, how do I know if I am being taken advantage of, we can actually talk to that or listen to that part of us. Or ask it. Ask your sovereign. So what's your feeling on this situation? And it can give us a sense. It can give us that higher perspective, independently of how we may feel or what we may think. And that's the thing. So the question had to do with, in this pandemic, when there's so many people who need our help, and we may be those people who really need help, but looking at it from the perspective of someone who's a giver, and as I said, I'm definitely a giver, but I've had to learn how to set boundaries. And I've gotten pretty good at it, still working on it. But the point is that it can be hard sometimes when we want to give and we want to donate or we want to help or we want to serve. How do we know when we've done too much? Or how do we know when we've sort of gone too far? How do we know when we're actually out of balance with what's healthy and right for us? And that's where the sovereign is the one who knows. The free spirit. So for example, if I see someone who's in need, I know that I have the free spirit inside of me wants to be like, here, I'll donate money, I'll donate clothes, I'll give you everything. It just wants to give and love and show love. It's exuberant and it's just so caring. And at the same time, if I were to follow every impulse that this free-spirited part of me wanted to follow, I would run out of money. I would probably not have any clothes, and I probably wouldn't be taking very good care of myself because I'd always be about taking care of other people. The impresario can be the part of us that wants to fix things for other people. So it may be the part that if there's someone who I'm presented in this pandemic with a problem, I want to fix it. I want to get in there and roll up my sleeves and fix it for them. And again, these are all really well intended, and I'm not saying don't do these. I'm just saying that what can happen is when we can go too far overboard and end up trying to fix things that aren't really our job to fix. Not everything is our job to fix, which can be really, really hard, because I know that whenever we see suffering, there's so many of us who just want to fix it. We want to make it better. But the important thing is really having a sense of, when does it feel right for us? When does it feel right for me? This is what I ask myself when I see someone in need. Is I check in. My heart, my free spirit may say, yes, yes, yes. Oh, I want to help them. Let's jump in there and help. My impresario may want to fix it. May want to even try to control this situation. Not control, because that's more the other side, but it may want to fix it. It may have the answers and want to just jump in there and do it for the person. But my sovereign is the one who knows. It's that balance between those two that says, okay, so I check in with my sovereign and I say, okay, so I'm feeling like I really want to do this, and I'm thinking I can fix this for the person, or I can take care of these things and, figure it out. But sovereign, what's your feeling on this situation? And I'll tune into my sovereign, because it's the one that knows what is right and wrong for me, independently of how I may feel or what I may think in that moment. And so I always go to my sovereign, because my sovereign is the one that's going to have that higher perspective. Because the truth of the matter is that, I may just be like, I want to help. But the reality is, it just may not be the right time for me to help. Or that just may not be the person that I am best equipped to serve. So my heart, my intentions may be great, but there may be sort of a higher thing going on here, almost like a higher purpose. And so I need to listen to that intuitive sense inside of me. Same thing with the impresario, is sometimes when we want to fix something for someone, what we can end up doing is actually denying them the opportunity to figure it out for themselves. So that's how we don't always serve everyone all the time when we try to do everything for everyone or fix everything for everyone. Or when someone asks us for something, you know, a lot of times we want to do that for them. And that's not bad, but I recommend, and this is coming, well, you do what you're going to do. But for me, what I've learned as one of your consummate givers and someone who I've gotten really, really sick over the years. I was a first responder at 9/11. And even before that, I was helping a lot of different people. And it really got to the point though where I completely lost myself. I lost my sense of self. I lost my sense of boundaries. I even lost my health on and off, and I still have some health struggles because I didn't honor what felt right for me. And you know, there were a number of things I learned during that time. My mom is always, I'm gonna have my mom on one of these Facebook Lives because she's just brilliant, and I'm gonna like interview her or something because she's amazing. But the point is, one of the things my mom said to me during that 9/11 period of my life, when I literally got to the point that I thought that if I didn't go to every single firehouse in the city and sit and listen to these firefighters and help them with their emotional problems, that they were going to kill themselves. And there were firefighters who were killing themselves. And that was extremely painful to watch. But one of the things my mom said, because my mother saw that I was experiencing what's called compassion fatigue. And one of the things she said to me was, Emily, you have to trust, I'm reading this here, you have to trust that their coping mechanisms that they developed before this tragedy will kick in. Okay, so that's a word of wisdom from a very wise woman, my mother, who's also a giver, to say, you know, just because people need help doesn't mean that we always have to be the one to give it. We also have to take care of ourselves, because obviously if we're not taking care of ourselves, then there ain't nothing to give. It's that classic, put on the oxygen mask first before you put it on the child next to you or the person next to you. So it's always about a balance of caring for others as well as for ourselves. I think actually in one of my social media posts, one of them recently was, if you're not caring for your, something like if you're not being kind to yourself, then you're not being kind. It doesn't make sense for us to only be kind to others and not be kind to ourselves. So it's a both and. It is not an either or thing here. Okay, so this is really what it's about though. And this, when it comes to empowers, and if you're struggling with your boundaries, their sovereign is the one you want to go to. All right. There's so much more to say about this, but I do want to end with what I think is a really interesting discovery by the amazing Brene Brown. If you're not familiar with her work, check out her Netflix special. I think it's called The Call to Courage. She's also got a podcast, and she's a researcher, and she's a social worker and a researcher. And she discovered something so shocking in her research. She discovers a lot of shocking things. She says a lot about shame and vulnerability. But she did this research, if I'm recalling this correctly, where she looked at who are the happiest people. And she tried to figure out who's the happiest, you know, who, and she does all these coding. She has them write, I guess, their thoughts, their feelings about things, and then she codes it to figure out what's at the core of these things. And she discovered to her shock and amazement that actually the happiest people are the most boundaried. And I hope I'm saying that accurately the way she expresses it, but it goes something like the happiest people are actually the most boundaried. Now that doesn't mean boundaried like walled off, but people who are able to set their boundaries in a healthy and calm and wise way, in a way that respects the other person as well as themselves. And that actually, to answer the question, Roman's question about how do we set our boundaries, especially when we're givers, especially when we just want to give of ourselves to everyone, but then when we do that, there's nothing left for ourselves. How do we then set our boundaries? Well, first of all, as I said, you've got to honor your sovereign there. I really recommend listen to that sovereign. You may feel, oh, I really want to do this, or you may think, well, I can fix this, but you really got to honor that sovereign. I believe the sovereign is the part that really knows. That's that higher sense of wisdom and intuition that knows what's right and wrong for you and knows where your boundaries are, okay? So listen to that sovereign. Honor what it says. And then in terms of the actual mechanics of how do you actually set your boundaries with people. So let's say someone comes to you directly and they ask for something. First of all, I don't think any of us is required, unless it's a major emergency and we need to act quickly, none of us is required to say yes to a request, okay? That's, I believe, part of being a healthy boundaried. You don't have to say yes. I recommend, and this is what I do, I'll speak for myself, I tune in. Someone asks me for something. Maybe they ask me for money. Maybe they ask me to endorse them for something. Maybe they ask for, just whatever. They ask for something. They ask me to help them in some way. I always check in first. Always check in with myself, because there may be that impulse to help because I want to help and I want to make it better. But I know that if I follow that impulse every time, I'm going to lose a sense of self. I'm going to lose a sense of boundaries. And then pretty soon I'm going to be completely depleted and I will be no good to anyone. So I always check in with my sovereign and I say, okay, so let's just feel this through. How does this feel? I know I feel like I really want to do it. I know I can, maybe I have some of the money and I can give it to them, but my sovereign's the one that's going to know. So I check in. And if my sovereign says, sure, this feels right, let's do this. This feels right for you, then I'll go ahead and do it. If my sovereign says, if I'm not really sure what my sovereign says, sometimes I'll check with other people first before I give that person an answer. And I'll just say, I don't know, I'm kind of feeling this through. And I get some feedback from other people that help me feel through what's going on inside of me so that I can honor my truth in responding to that request. If I can definitely tell that this doesn't feel right, I could respond in a few different ways. One might be, I really appreciate you asking, and I can tell that you're in need or you're struggling. It depends on what the person asks me, of course, and how they ask me. I say, I could tell that you're really needing that. One answer could be, it just doesn't feel right for me right now. And that's it. You don't have to explain yourself. You don't have to justify your choice. You can just simply say, you know what, I understand that you're in need and I really appreciate you asking. It just really doesn't feel right for me, but it may feel right for other people. Right? So you're also acknowledging that you're not the only one who could be available to help that person. And in fact, other people may feel called to help that person. They may be the ones better equipped to help that person. Another thing that I might add to that is sometimes I'll have people ask me for things. I'm a mentor to a lot of people around the world, and a lot of them are in some pretty desperate situations, and so I get asked for things relatively frequently. And so what I've come to discover is that I feel badly if I don't feel right giving them the thing that they ask for, because if I gave all the money that everybody asked for from me, I would have no money left. So I might feel badly that I'm saying no to their, let's say, their request for money, a donation for their organization. But then what I'll do is I'll tune in, I'll say, okay, so that doesn't feel right. But what does feel right? What is something that I can offer that does feel right? So it might be a contact. It might be a link to a website. It might be, some other kinds of resources. It might be a friend's advice. It might, it could be any number of things. So it doesn't have to be an all or nothing thing where you're either giving or you're not giving. Okay? It can be a both and. It could be, I don't feel right giving you, in your own mind, I don't feel right giving them that thing. But you know what do I feel right giving them? Oh, you know what? I could give them a phone number for somewhere. I could connect them with someone who could be in a better position to help. So I hope this is helpful in terms of, not just in terms of how to tune into what are your boundaries and where to tune in. Again, the inner sovereign is the part of you that knows what is right or wrong for you independently of anyone else. So this is the part that knows your boundaries, okay, your healthy boundaries. So it's that, but then it's also the mechanics of, okay, so how do you respond if someone requests something, or if you're seeing someone in need? You tune in here, and then if you need to respond to that person or that group directly, then it's a matter of saying, you know what, like empathizing. I hear, having compassion. I hear that you're really struggling right now. I hear that that's something you really need. I hear that, to be honest with you, it just doesn't feel right for me right now. And that's it. Or you can say, giving you that thing doesn't quite feel right for me, but you know what, here's what I can offer you, and offer some other way to help. So I hope this is helpful for those of you who are givers, and I also even hope for some people that tend to feel like they need things and they're asking for things and they're not getting what they want. I hope also there's some awareness, and I've been one of those people too, where I needed things, I wanted things, I wish people would give me certain things, when I felt desperate, to also recognize that as Brene Brown says, the happiest people are the most boundaried. And so it is really important for us to honor our own boundaries as well as other people's, and recognize that, that person may not be the one to help us, but maybe somebody else can. Maybe there's someone else out there who can help us or support us in a way that, would be for our own highest good. So that's just, believe it or not, that's just a brief sort of synopsis about, or, you know, covering boundaries. There's a lot more when it comes to the X powers, you know, the sovereign and how it relates to the inner defender and things like that. That's where you get into setting boundaries that aren't necessarily healthy. There's a whole lot more. You can always check my website, check out the free program. But anyway, I hope this has been helpful. I know this is a really tough time for a lot of people. I know there are a lot of people in need, and I just want you to know my heart goes out to you. And I hope that this really does help us to develop a better sense of tuning into ourselves, when that comes to what it is that we want to do, how it is that we want to serve, and ways that we can set our boundaries so that we can be the healthiest and happiest and most empowered and light-filled possible. All right. I hope this is helpful. Everyone, take care.